"Where is he?" asked Donati. "In the kingdom of heaven," intoned the cardinal. "And the body?" Had Albanese not heard the sacred calling, he might have moved slabs of marble for his living, or hurled carcasses in a Calabrian abattoir. Donati followed him along a brief corridor into the bedroom. 3 more cardinals waited in the half-light: Marcel Gobert, José Maria Navarro, and Angelo Francona. Gobert was the Secretary of State, effectively the Prime Minister and chief diplomat of the world's smallest country. Navarro was prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, guardian of Catholic orthodoxy, defender against heresy. Francona, the oldest of the 3, was the dean of the College of Cardinals. As such, he would preside over the next conclave. It was Navarro, a Spaniard of noble stock, who addressed Donati first. Though he had lived and worked in Rome for nearly a quarter-century, he still spoke Italian with a pronounced Castilian accent. "Luigi, I know how painful this must be for you. We were his faithful servants, but you were the one he loved the most." Cardinal Gobert, a thin Parisian with a feline face, nodded profoundly at the Spaniard's curial bromide, as did the 3 laymen standing in the shadow at the edge of the room: Dr. Octavio Gallo, the Holy Father's personal physician, Lorenzo Vitale, chief of the Corpo della Gendarmeria, and Colonel Alois Metzler, commandant of the Pontifical Swiss Guard. Donati, it seemed, was the last to arrive. It was he, the private secretary, who should have summoned the senior princes of the church to the bedside of the dead pope, not the Camerlengo. Suddenly, he was racked by guilt. But when Donati looked down at the figure stretched upon the bed, his guilt gave way to overwhelming grief. Lucchesi was still wearing his white soutane, though his slippers had been removed, and his giubbetto was nowhere to be seen. Someone had placed the hands upon the chest. They were clutching his rosary. The eyes were closed, the jaw slack, but there was no evidence of pain on his face, nothing to suggest he had suffered. Indeed, Donati would not have been surprised if His Holiness woke suddenly and inquired about his evening. He was still wearing his white soutane. Donati had been the keeper of the Holy Father's schedule from the first day of his pontificate. The evening routine rarely varied: dinner from 7 to 8:30, paperwork in the study from 8:30 until 10, followed by 15 minutes of prayer and reflection in his private chapel. Typically, he was in bed by 10:30, usually with an English detective novel, his guilty pleasure. Devices and Desires by P.D. James lay on the bedside table beneath his reading glasses. Donati opened it to the page marked. 45 minutes later, Ricard's was back at the scene of the murder. Donati closed the book. The Supreme Pontiff, he reckoned, had been dead for nearly 2 hours, perhaps longer. Calmly he asked, "Who found him? Not one of the household nuns, I hope?" "It was me," replied Cardinal Albanese. "Where was he?" "His Holiness departed this life from the chapel. I discovered him a few minutes after 10. As for the exact time of his passing—" The Calabrian shrugged his heavy shoulders. "I cannot say, Excellency." "Why wasn't I contacted immediately?" "I searched for you, everywhere." "You should have called my mobile." "I did, several times, in fact. There was no answer." The Camerlengo, thought Donati, was being untruthful. "And what were you doing in the chapel, Eminence?" "This is beginning to sound like an inquisition." Albanese's eyes moved briefly to Cardinal Navarro before settling once more on Donati. "His Holiness asked me to pray with him. I accepted his invitation." "He phoned you directly?" "In my apartment," said the Camerlengo with a nod. "At what time?" Albanese lifted his eyes to the ceiling as though trying to recall a minor detail that had slipped his mind. 9:15, perhaps 9:20. He asked me to come a few minutes after 10. When I arrived—" Donati looked down at the man stretched lifeless upon the bed. "And how did he get here?" "I carried him." "Alone?" "His Holiness bore the weight of the church on his shoulders," said Albanese.